How we doing, everyone? It's Odin here from Armored Heaven, and this week for our tech bits, it's going to be a little bit longer than normal. Okay, maybe a lot longer than normal, but I'm going to show you how to install the AAP hammer bearings on your own AAP. Alright, so here we are on the tech bench. So, customise Jay McCall has kindly offered the use of his pistol so I can do this demonstration. So he has his hammer bearing that he's already bought here and his AAP. So let's get this out of the road. The bearing there. Alright, no mag in, obviously. Now, first thing you want to do is remove the upper. So push the button in, separate the upper. Set that over to the side. Now, there is two ways to go about getting the hammer out. If you know the quick and easy way, you probably don't need this tutorial. So on this one, I'm going to do it the proper, full way. Quick and easy way essentially is when you're taking the hammer group out, you manipulate it around the trigger bar. You can do it. It does run the risk if you have a weak trigger bar of snapping it or bending it. It's not something I've done personally, however, for the sake of completeness, I'm going to show you the proper way to remove it. So start off by removing some screws. So we've got the 3 screws there. Now we've got to remove the safety. So that's the safety on the AAPs. So all we do to remove that is where we've got the little tabs here that are spring loaded, those ones. So just simply push that towards the trigger and it'll come out. And then same on the other side. Sometimes they'll just pop out, sometimes they won't. So I'm just gonna make it difficult. There we go. Alright, so there's the 3 screws out. Now we've got punch. Push the trigger pin through on the side. Doesn't really matter which side. You'll find though, typically on gel blasters, the knurled section, which is what the section of the bar that you want to go in last, is typically on the right hand side. Some do change it, some don't. That goes for whether you're talking about the pins through the center of an AEG receiver, pistol pins, whatever. I always try to go that direction because that's the way most of them are done. Alright, so we take that out and that will loosen up the front chassis. We can remove that. So there's the front chassis section out. Now, just so it doesn't run away on us, we've got our trigger spring there. I'll grab that and pull that out. Set them over there. Alright, and then we can lift up. So that's our slide catch or bolt catch on the AAP and the spring for it. Now those little springs, they are slightly different between Glock and AAP, not a lot different, just slightly different bend in them. This is typically what will stop your gel blaster pistol in Kappa Glock. No, sorry, not Kappa. Glock and AAP. Don't know where I'm going with Kappa there. Glock and AAP, they use very similar spring. Those springs are sized to work with an airsoft weight magazine in the spring. So they're a little bit heavy for a gel weight magazine spring. By reshaping these, i.e. taking a little bit of the tension out of them, you can quite easily fix most Glock slides that won't lock back doing that. Or you can come in here and get one of our Garda magazine springs and upgrade your spring in your mags, and then you won't have the issue at all. Okay, so 2 more pins out. There's our trigger and trigger bar. If we were going to do the trigger, now would be the time that we would do that, simply by pushing out these pins here, top one, and that will separate the trigger bar off. We could then put any number of triggers. The Cow AAP ones drop straight in. So what you're looking for that's rather important on these triggers, and some have them, some don't, depends on where you buy them from. So I always use the cow Glock triggers because they are shaped correctly, whereas some of the other ones that have been sold by other stores, they're not actually shaped where this has a scallop down surface, so they'll actually come out and down like that, which is that's more of the P1 shape. As we moved into the better made Glocks, they started having this face here cut off, which allows it to work with the safety. So if you've put a trigger in and you can't get your safety in or working, that will be what the story is. Now, I've filed that down on another trigger early in the piece when I didn't have a cow trigger. I used to file very much like so, and I filed half of that down flat. However, just buy a cow trigger, they work. Alright, so that's the lower gutted now. The only thing that's actually left in there at this point is the mag release. So everything else is out. Now the fun part, so now we get to pull the hammer group apart. So you get a couple of springs you got to worry about when you're in here. First of all is the knocker lock spring. So this is the knocker lock on this side, and what that does, as you can see now, that knocker is slightly proud. That is what would actually hit the discharge valve in the mag. So that there, which just fell out, it will do that. But so that there, what it actually does in function is when our hammer goes back and resets, our valve knocker is still sitting proud until that knocker lock drops down. So that's what that does. It holds that pin out to continue discharging gas whilst everything's cycling. Now that's whether you're on Glock, Kappa, just about any gas blowback, it's going to have a knocker lock, it's going to have a knocker. It's how you get the continuous gas flow until the recoil starts happening, and the recoiling slide will bolt in this instance, and that's what pushes down on that to reset that. I'm talking more about the entire function of the pistol here than I am specifically what you need to know about the AAP bearing, but if you're pulling your AAP apart to this point, you probably should know a few things about it. Now that I've reset the hammer, I'm going to want to let that off before I knock this pin out, because it's put tension back on that spring. Now in the pistol itself, when this is sitting as it would be, your trigger bar would come along and hit that piece right there. So if I just take my punch and push back on that, sorry, this always gets me. So on these, because they have the full auto function, you've got to push down on this little tab here, you click, and then you push back on that, and that's how the hammers come up. Spring will still have some tension on it, but not as much. So now we're going to be pushing out this central pin here, which is large on this side, small on this side, so it's going to pass the opposite way of what I was talking about when removing the body pins. It's going to go from your right to your left, and when it does, there is a little bit of spring tension there, so the hammer will want to pop a little bit, not a lot, just like that, just enough to disappear across the carpet and never be seen again. Now that's then brought the actual valve knocker back on that spring. So for reference, when that's coming back, pay attention. The spring is actually, if I can get my fingers out of the road of it, so the spring actually goes into the bottom of it there. Alright, so that's where that would sit, but we'll get more into that when we put it back together. So now we have, this would be the completed hammer because it's fallen apart. So that's the AAP stock hammer, alright, with the stock, what is it, Guns Modify Zero Hammer type design. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to remove this piece here. Alright, now if you've got the standard AAP cast one, it's fairly soft metal, you don't have to worry too much about whether like sanding it, filing it, whatever you want to do down, because it is soft. What I actually do to cheat, because it makes life easier, I got a little pair of Japanese flush cutters. Now for those who don't know what flush cutters are, they will cut flush to those jaws. There's no indent where the jaw is like a normal side cutters, so it doesn't do it perfectly, but grab hold of that, done, and straight away we're down to that much of that nub left. So now we just grab our file and we take that down till it's smooth. and it will not take much. Now, when you go and buy files, you'll see that there's bastard files, and I'm not swearing, that's the actual name, bastard files. First cut files, final cut files. You're looking for the smoother ones for this sort of a work. So this is a final cut file, so it's about, I think it's about a third the cut of a bastard file, which is what most people typically have as a bastard file. That's the one that's always just sort of kicked around because they work well for most applications, but they're a bit heavy on the cast stuff. So try and get yourself a fine file cut, a fine cut file or a finishing file, and then just gently, you can use a Dremel for this. I think I used a Dremel once when I didn't have a file handy, but we're getting there. It's always better to take slowly at this point, because when it comes to these, you can't put material back on. Round that back edge out. Now when I say rounding the back edge out, so you can see it there. So there was that little nub there, completely gone now. This is the edge I was talking about rounding out, because when you've taken that material away from there and filed it down, it then goes sharp. So just round that off a little bit, but that's what you're looking for there, just a flat surface with nothing in the road. And then your bearing, your little hammer bearing, presses straight into that hole, like so, and that's it. So now we put it all back together. Starting with our valve knocker, we hook the bottom of it into the spring, push that up and into place. Now when our hammer jumped out on us, I didn't actually pay attention to where the spring went, and here's where the fun is. Now that we've found that spring that was sitting right there, and apparently I'm just blind even with my glasses on, we can put it back together. So, Glock hammer springs. You've got a short leg and you've got a long leg. The short leg goes up against that stop just there. Where's my little pointer? So short leg goes up against this stop just here. You'll figure out if you put it the wrong way around and you put the long leg on there, it won't go past the bearing. So that's the easy way to tell. So short leg on, just double check that that doesn't actually hit the hammer bearing, which looks like this one's gonna, oh no, we're good, cool. Spring in position. And this is where, if the audio goes quiet, it's because I've started swearing. Okay, so give me a moment. More forward than vertical. So essentially what you want is this leg of the spring going straight down in as much as you can, because you've also got to straddle the knocker. Drop that down into position, and when I say into position, I mean so that it's poking through the front like it was going to be discharging gas out of the mag. And then, so looking at it from the bottom, you can see that that hammer is straddling the valve knocker and is behind this piece here, which is that big black bit there. That's actually the sear, so it's behind that. Get that in, and we need to position it so that we get that leg of that spring. I'll show you where that comes up in a moment once I get it there. It's quite a difficult thing to do on camera, and it seems to be taking about 30 times longer because there's a camera, but we will persevere. There we go. Now we get somewhere. Right. Okay. So I've now got it loosely reassembled to the point of where you want to start thinking about putting pins in. So as you'll see here, we've got, so to get your orientation right, that would be the front of the pistol this way. Looking at this from the back, so this would be where the web of your hand would be, right? So looking at it from that angle, we have the sear, the valve knocker, the hammer, and what's important at this point is, if you can see it, the leg of the hammer spring is on this part of the chassis. It needs to be out here, okay? That's how the hammer spring gets its tension to come forward. So now that we're all in that sort of spot, a little bit of a push and a shove. Use our punch to start lining it up as things come in. And essentially what you're doing here is you're fighting these springs because they don't want to go into position, but they have to go into position so we can put the pin back through. It's called preload. Cool. So the cheeky way of doing it, put your punch through from, in this instance, as we talked about, because the pin would come out from right to left, put your pin punch in on the right side. Now you can grab your actual pin, and you can chase your pin punch back through like so, with a bit of a wiggle. So the trick here is, because the pin punch is significantly smaller than the actual pin, we were able to get it through easier. Caveat to that is now we've got to get the full-size pin through, which means we've got to get everything into alignment. So we're just wiggling that around until everything comes into alignment. Now I'm through the hammer, I'm through the knocker, I'm sitting up here, that's why it's still a little bit proud, but because I've got it mostly through the hammer, I can take the punch out, give it a bit of a twist, and we're in, right? In, reset, fire. Now that fired because I haven't put that spring back in onto the sear. It was only riding on the auto. Now I use tweezers, a pair of tweezers. Reset the hammer to get the pressure off the knocker, bring the knocker back. Now this is where I've got to put that spring back in place. Now let me grab it and put it in place, and then I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this is the spring here that I'm talking about. So that hooked end needs to go into that bottom hole on the disconnector as we were talking about. And I will now proceed to argue with this for the next minute or two. Let's try my other tweezers. I'm not saying everyone should have multiple pairs of tweezers on their desk to do multiple different kinds of jobs, but damn, it makes life easy. Well, easier. Oh, cool. So that was the spring there. That leg there was the one that was poking out here. So we've brought that over, and it's now into the bottom hole in the knocker. For anyone wondering, the reason I use those tweezers is they have a very special jaw on them, and that fork there is perfect for grabbing wire. So that's everything back together now. So if I let the auto sear off, that's held on the main sear. Main sear, hammer comes up, bearing rotates nicely. Yep, happy days. Now, reverse. So this piece can fall out on you. It's the lock for the upper, so it's just a piece of metal with a spring, goes in like so, and then hold that in, and the rear chassis needs to go in with the trigger bar, of course, and the disconnector. Don't mind me getting ahead of myself here. The knocker blocker, I should say. Knocker block is in, trigger bar is in. Hey, that looks a lot better. Now we can drop all of that back in. Push that in. Make sure when you're dropping it in that you are lining it up with the correct location. I'll show you what that looks like here. So Here where you've got that pin and that above it, you'll see that there's actually a checked out section in the frame for that, and it will only fit in perfectly in the exact right spot. So once it's in that spot, it'll go straight down, no dramas. Put our pins back in. It would help if I put them in the right spot. However, there's a short one and a long one, so you'll know if you put them in the wrong spot because they won't fit properly. Cool. So that's all back in. The fun part about this is I'm going to have to pull this front chassis out again shortly because Jay has got himself a trigger for it. He's just away getting it Cerakoted at the moment. Trigger spring back on the hook, goes onto the little nubbin that pokes out the side of the front chassis. And the front chassis will drop back into place, like so. Now we need to put the slide lock in. Of course, I did that the wrong order around, didn't I? There we go. Now we can put the front chassis back in. Hey, that worked better. If I had the spring on there. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. Alright, so the front chassis is back in. Trigger bar and everything's in. We're just holding that in with my finger. Before I go and put the pin back in, I'm going to have to slot this spring, the spring for the slide lock back in. But I think we're pretty much done. Yeah, slide lock spring now. It's in. I'm going to do my best to show you. However, I'm not going to jeopardize that falling out again. So, on top of that little hook just there, down in here, under and back over, and this is the other end of it, just there. Now that is supposed to sit upright, and it... Happy days. Now before it all goes south on me again, I'm going to put the trigger pin in. There we go. Right, now that's locked all that in there. Perfect. Screws. .2mm hex driver. They're an M3 screw which uses a 2mm hex driver. And I do always prefer using hex drivers than Allen keys. They're a more precise fitment in the screws. And then of course we need to put our safety back. Now up is up obviously, and when you're looking at the word up you want it so that it's correct to you. Get the pistol frame away from you and then you just wiggle it through. Done. Safety works. Sears work. Auto sear trigger. Auto sear trigger. Cool. All right. In, done. Now you will notice if you gently let that forward like that, it will sit there now. The design of this is as such that when the slide is going backwards, it drags the leading face up, which resets the hammer, but then as the bolt comes forward, it actually rolls that forward until it's a flat surface and it passes over the top. That's why it's called a zero hammer, because in theory there's zero friction from the hammer as it's going forward. It was originally made by Guns Modify. I don't know what the story is. I thought it would have been something that they patented, but now we've got AAP using it. We've got APS have been using it for a long time. Yeah, anyway, they're a good idea, but however, when you're using the AAPs, it's important to know that that's a hardened piece of steel. It's tool steel that's been hardened. It's very, very hard. That's cast metal. It's not very, very hard. That will chew into that, and that's why we use the bearing. So works fine without it. Sorry, when you're just letting it snap. Let's put some gas in his mag and give it a bit of a test fire, and then we'll be done. Out of gas. Definitely need to purge that mag for him. But yeah, so that's how you install a hammer bearing. Now I'm going to have to cut a heap of parts out of that or speed them up or something like that. I'll do my best to make sure I've got the best explanations and demonstrations in there that I can do. But look, if there's something in here that I haven't done, come in, have a chat to us, send me a message, give us a call, whatever. And that's how you install the hammer bearing on your AAP. Now, as always, if there's something I haven't explained clearly in the video, please get in touch. Give us a call, come in and see us. We're on Facebook and we're also on Instagram. Feel free to shoot us a message. With that said, I'm Odin. This has been my tech bench for the first time where we're doing a video here. You're going to see more videos like this. I'm set up here now with the camera so I can do videos a lot easier and I can actually show you a top-down view. So have a good weekend, everybody. Have fun. Go play games. For anyone playing in tomorrow's ASL comp, I give you the best of wishes and I hope you win. But, you know, let's be real. VK is going to be there, so I kind of hope they win too. All right. With that said, have a good weekend, everyone. I'll talk to you later.
Another Gel Blaster review by Armored Heaven.